an innocent act of love. And the waitress discovers who the child's father was before we begin. Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching this story from? I love to know how far these emotions are reaching. And if you enjoy love stories full of twists, resilience, and true feelings, subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss any content, and you'll help the channel grow and continue bringing these stories to more people. The clock read 8:17 p.m. when Emily Dawson set the stainless steel tray on the kitchen counter and let out a quiet sigh. The golden lights of the five-star restaurant reflected off her fair skin, already marked by the fatigue of the day. Her blonde hair was tied up in a loose bun, with a few strands escaping and sticking to her forehead, damp from the heat and the constant pressure of appearing flawless in front of customers who never remembered her name. She moved through the dining room with agile, silent steps, balancing a plate of seafood and a glass of wine when something caught her attention. At the table by the glass window, where the rainy night gently tapped against the pane, a frail little boy was struggling in vain to cut a piece of grilled chicken with his two trembling hands. He looked about 5 years old. His pale skin contrasted with the navy blue scarf draped over his lap. His light brown hair was neatly combed, but his eyes, large and clear like wet glass, reflected a subtle abandonment. No nanny, no mother, just a distant waiter watching the scene with indifference. Emily felt something in her chest. An old ache, a memory she didn't dare to name. She left what she was doing, wiped her hands on her white apron, and slowly approached, crouching beside the child. "Hey there, champ. Need some help?" she asked with a sweetness that seemed to come from within, not from professional duty. The boy looked at her like someone spotting a shooting star. He said nothing, just nodded, eyes full of relief. Emily gently took the fork, cut the chicken into small pieces, and arranged the vegetables on the plate. Then she lifted the spoon and carefully brought it to his mouth. "Is this okay?" she asked, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. "Yeah," the boy murmured with a shy smile, his voice as light as a breeze. From the back of the room, near the bar, a man in a dark suit was watching everything. Tall, broad-shouldered, with light brown hair perfectly slicked back, he held a glass of whiskey like a shield. His grayish-green eyes were fixed on Emily with intensity. That simple waitress, kneeling before his son, was doing what no one else could, calming him. He pressed his lips together, tense. This was supposed to be just a quiet dinner, a silent evening after a business meeting. But the image of the waitress kneeling, gently smiling at Noah, stirred something in him he didn't understand and refused to accept. Emily didn't notice his presence. She remained focused on the boy, now more relaxed, softly talking about his favorite cartoon as he chewed slowly. She smiled, and something in the atmosphere seemed to shift. The sophisticated restaurant, with its hanging chandeliers and crystal glasses, faded into the background. What mattered was that moment, that gesture. Innocent, deep. "Do you come here often?" the boy suddenly asked. Emily chuckled softly. "Only to work, but I can visit you if you'd like." He smiled. A wide, genuine smile. And at that moment, to him, she wasn't just a waitress. She was someone who looked at him as a child, not as an heir. In the background, the man in the suit slowly stood up. His firm steps crossed the polished marble floor. But as he got close, he changed direction and left silently, unnoticed. His eyes had changed. For the first time in a long while, he had felt small. Still kneeling, Emily looked out the window and saw the rain sliding down the glass. She had no idea she'd been seen, much less that she had just entered, unknowingly, the life of a man who never allowed himself to feel. The next day, the restaurant looked the same. The white tablecloths perfectly laid out, the gleaming silverware, the scent of herbs wafting from the kitchen. But something in the air felt different. The looks, the whispers. Emily felt it the moment she stepped into the dining room. She went straight to the locker room, where she swapped her blouse for the starched uniform and tied the apron back around her waist. Her body still ached from the double shift the night before, but it was when she opened her phone, just before putting it in her locker, that her world paused for a few seconds. On the screen, a video, short, shaky, but touching her, kneeling beside Noah, feeding him with care. His face lit up by a faint smile, and the caption, "The waitress who treated a billionaire's son with more love than his own family." The view count climbed in real time. Hundreds of thousands, then millions. Comments in all languages, hearts, tears. Outraged. Emily raised her hand to her mouth, stunned. But who filmed this? At that exact moment, the supervisor entered the locker room with hurried steps. She was an elegant woman, with tightly pulled back dark hair and a stern expression. "Emily Dawson?" She turned, still holding her phone. "Yes, ma'am." "Your manager wants to see you. Now." Emily's heart raced. She hurriedly shut her locker and walked down the narrow hallway, her hands sweating. When she entered the office, the restaurant, manager, a balding, middle-aged man with an always condescending gaze, didn't smile like usual. He sat upright in his chair, fingers interlaced on the desk. "Close the door," she obeyed. "Do you know why you're here?" Emily hesitated. "Does it have to do with the video?" "Oh, so you've seen it." He sighed. "You fed a customer. A child, without permission. That breaks house protocol." Emily frowned, her voice shaky. He was alone. No one came to help him. He couldn't hold the fork. "That's not your problem, Dawson." She lowered her eyes. Swallowed hard. "Look, we're not going to fire you. At least not for now." He stood and walked to the window. "But we received a direct request from hotel management. Someone very important wants you to be closely watched." Emily raised her head, confused. "Watched?" He turned to her. "They said you might have intentions. That maybe you're trying to take advantage of the situation. But that's absurd. I didn't even know who he was." "Well, now you do. The child is Noah Whitmore, only son of Nathaniel Whitmore, Jr., the most powerful name behind this hotel chain." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. I was just trying to help." The manager stared at her for a few seconds, then spoke more softly. "Watch your steps, Emily. This isn't just a restaurant. It's sensitive ground. And you've stepped into an area no one enters without consequence." Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, in a top-floor office of a glass tower, Nathaniel Whitmore, Jr. kept his eyes fixed on his laptop screen. The video was playing, on repeat. He had watched it over 20 times. With each new viewing, something inside him cracked a little more. That waitress, kneeling beside Noah, smiling tenderly, treated his son with a humanity he himself didn't know how to offer. But he couldn't admit that, not to others, not to himself. With steady fingers, he pressed the intercom button. "Mr. Whitmore?" His assistant answered on the other end. "Put someone on this woman, discreetly. I want everything on her. Where she came from, who she lives with, her full background." "Yes, sir." He slowly closed the laptop, got up and walked to the window. The rain had returned, fine and steady, like a memory that refuses to leave. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase the image of the waitress. And that bothered him more than it should have. The rain persisted in Charleston, thin as a veil, turning the city streets into a mosaic of reflections and shadows. Inside the restaurant, business continued as usual, but something was about to change. Emily had just finished serving a table when the manager called her over with a curt gesture. She walked up to him, adjusting her apron with trembling hands. still feeling the weight of the previous day and the warning she hadn't even processed fully. "We have a new customer today. Table 14. Take good care of him," the manager said, without meeting her eyes. Emily simply nodded. She had already learned that kindness in that place was a rare commodity. At the indicated table, a man sat with his back to her, wearing a dark linen blazer and an open-collar shirt, his hair slightly tousled as if the wind had purposely played with it. When she approached with the menu, he slowly lifted his gaze, and there he was. Nathaniel Whitmore, Jr., but she didn't know that. Nate had changed cars, left his security detail a block away, and ditched the tailored suit he needed to see for himself who this waitress was, the one who had shaken his reputation, or at least that's what he told himself. Deep down, there was something more. Something he couldn't yet name. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to start with something to drink?" Emily asked, her voice gentle but frayed inside. The dark circles under her blue eyes weren't covered by makeup. "Just water for now, and I'm not in a rush to order." "Could you give me a few minutes?" Nate replied, feigning disinterest, though each of her words hit him like an electric current. "Of course. I'll be over there if you need me." She walked away, returning to her routine. But Nate wasn't looking at the menu. His eyes discreetly followed her, analyzing. She wasn't what he had expected. No heavy makeup, no high heels, no calculated smiles. Just her, real, with a tired beauty of someone who lives more for others than for herself. After dinner, when Emily went to the kitchen to drop off an order, he took the opportunity to discreetly follow her. That's when he saw her on her knees on the pantry floor, scrubbing a spilled sauce with a damp cloth and bare hands. The fluorescent lights of the kitchen highlighted the glisten in her eyes, not from physical effort, but from the tears falling uncontrollably. With her phone wedged between her shoulder and ear, she whispered, "I know, Max. I know it hurts. But the doctor said you need to keep taking the medicine. I'll figure it out, okay? Even if I have to work all night, I promise." On the other end, a child's voice sobbed. "Will you come see me tomorrow, Emmy?" She squeezed her eyes shut and took a deep breath. "I will. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, I'll come." She hung up, stayed there for a moment with her head down, then slowly got up, carrying the dignity of someone who cries in silence, and returned to work. Nathaniel stood motionless behind a shelf. He felt the lump in his throat tighten, his blood boil. That wasn't an act. That woman wasn't a threat. She was a survivor. Back in the dining room, he discreetly pulled the manager aside. "That waitress, Emily, can she be trusted?" The manager hesitated. "She's one of the most dedicated, discreet. But after the video, things changed." Nate narrowed his eyes. "I want her available for a private event. Something more intimate, exclusive. But don't tell her it was my request." "As you wish, sir." Nate left the restaurant without finishing his meal. The food had lost its flavor. What he wanted now was something he didn't know how to control, to understand that woman, to test her, or maybe to be tested by her. And Emily, that night, while cleaning the last tables of the shift, eyes still red, had no idea that the turning point that would change everything was already in motion, nor that the man who would come into her life again would be the same one who, unknowingly, was about to risk his own heart. The ballroom of the historic hotel was adorned with golden candelabras, antique tapestries, and a subtle scent of white, flowers that filled the air with a false sense of ease. It was a private gala night for a select few. Businessmen, politicians, and Charleston's elite mingled among champagne flutes and fabricated smiles. Emily entered through the side of the room, dressed in a black uniform with a discreet apron. Her hair was tied in a neat bun, her eyes alert to every detail, and her heart heavy with the feeling of not belonging. She was there as part of the extra staff sent without knowing by whom until now. She was walking toward the buffet table when she heard a familiar child's voice softly calling, "Emily?" She turned, and there he was, Noah. The boy ran across the room with still wobbly legs and, ignoring the stairs, threw himself into her arms. Emily held him tightly. Crouching to meet his gaze, the boy's eyes were filled with tears, but shining with something rare, relief. "You really came," he murmured, wrapping his frail little arms around her neck. Emily felt a lump in her throat. "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? They said you were just a waitress, that you wouldn't come see me anymore." She tightened a hug, ignoring the clinking glasses behind her, ignoring the disapproving looks from the wealthy crowd. In that moment, there was only Noah. "I came because I care about you. That will never change." On the opposite side of the ballroom, a tall man observed the scene with a glass of whiskey in hand. Nate stood by the staircase, eyes fixed on the reunion. The emotion on Noah's face cut through him like a blade, yet he remained still, like a living statue. Pride, fear, guilt, all mixed into a silence only he understood. Later, while serving trays in the prep kitchen, Emily couldn't get Noah out of her mind. The way he ran to her, how he trembled when he spoke. The fear of being forgotten. That wasn't just childish neediness. It was abandonment. She quietly asked an older employee who worked the same floor, "Do you know the boy in the gala room? The one with the navy scarf?" The woman, her graying hair pulled into a tight bun, hesitated before answering. "I do. Noah. His mother died tragically about 2 years ago. It was ugly." Emily felt her heart tighten. Tragically how? An overdose. Found alone in a room. They say she was unstable. The family never approved of the relationship. She glanced around and lowered her voice. "But the father—" the father's a mystery. Never shows up, never speaks. Almost no one's seen him with the boy." Emily swallowed hard. "But he's here tonight, isn't he? They say so. But no one knows who he is. It's like he's a ghost." The waitress nodded, but inside, everything screamed. The pieces were beginning to fall into place with a silent crash. That night, stepping out the side door as the rain began again, Emily walked slowly along the wet cobblestone sidewalk. Her uniform still damp, shoes tight, body exhausted. But what truly weighed on her was the name echoing in her mind. Nathaniel Whitmore, Jr., the man who watched her in silence. The man who hired her for that night. The man who, by the boy's own words, was a stranger in his own home. She stopped under a canvas awning, breathing deeply. Something was profoundly wrong, and for the first time she felt fear. Not for what might happen to her, but for what Noah still hid behind that sweet smile, and for the kind of pain no one in that family had ever dared to face. The afternoon sun bathed Charleston in a golden light, but the warmth couldn't ease the tension. Pressing on Emily's chest as the car approached the mansion, the wrought iron gate opened slowly before the hired driver, revealing a property straight out of an old novel. Perfectly manicured gardens, imposing white columns, and the silence of places that hide more than they show. Emily held the envelope with the signed offer. The amount was far more than she could have imagined for 2 weeks caring for a child. It was enough to pay for her brother's medication, the piled-up bills, and a bit of peace, even if temporary. She took a deep breath, adjusted the simple blouse she wore, and stepped out of the car with careful steps. A middle-aged woman, dressed plainly with a rigid posture, opened the door. "Good afternoon, Miss Dawson. We've been expecting you. Mr. Whitmore would like to greet you personally." Emily frowned. That was strange. The man behind the offer, until then anonymous, Wanted to meet her? She nodded and followed. The woman down a long hallway with gleaming floors, lined with old paintings and tall windows. As she turned the final corner, she froze. Standing by a dark leather armchair, sleeves rolled up and eyes just as intense as the first time he saw her, was him. Nathaniel Whitmore, Jr. Emily froze in place. It was as if time had stopped and all surrounding sounds had vanished. The air felt heavier. She took a hesitant step forward, still in shock. "You?" she whispered, unable to hide her astonishment. He held her gaze for a few seconds before speaking, his voice deep and restrained. "Yes, I'm Noah's father." Emily took a step back. Her face lost allure. "You hired me, knowing who I was?" Nate nodded silently. She swallowed hard, eyes welling up with tears she hadn't invited. "You used me as a piece in your game?" she asked, her voice trembling, like the words heard on their way out. Nate didn't look away, but he didn't come closer either. He just stood there, still, as if on the edge of an invisible cliff. "I needed to know who you really were. If you were like the others, if you were after my name." "My son," Emily slowly shook her head, the bitter taste of disappointment rising in her mouth. "So you tested me? You planned all this?" "Since that dinner at the restaurant." He took a deep breath. His eyes weren't arrogant, but guilty. A guilt that ate him from the inside and kept him from defending himself properly. "I saw you with Noah. I saw how he looked at you. How he smiled like he hadn't in months. I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to trust." Emily felt the tears fall. She didn't try to hide them. "You didn't trust me, but you let your son love me. And that, Mr. Whitmore, is cowardly." The accusation hung in the air like a verdict. Nate took a step forward, his voice faltering for the first time. "I'm not an easy man, Emily. I lost my son's mother. In a stupid way. And since then, I haven't trusted anyone, not even myself." She looked at him in silence, breathing heavily. There was something in his pain that she understood, but it wasn't enough. "You need to understand one thing," she said firmly. "I can take life hurting me, but I won't let anyone mess with my dignity." Emily turned to leave, her steps quick, hand clutching the envelope to her chest. But as she reached the door, she heard his voice again, now unguarded. "I didn't mean to hurt you." She stopped, but didn't look back. "Then why is that exactly what you did?" And she walked out, leaving Nathaniel alone in that massive room, surrounded by luxury. And emptiness. At the top of the stairs, a small figure had seen everything. Noah, hidden behind the wall, had heard every word. And there, in that silence, heavy with truths, something broke. Something that might never have been whole. The following days came like a soft drizzle, constant, quiet, and full of feelings no one could name. Emily returned to the mansion the day after the confrontation. Nate hadn't insisted, but he hadn't apologized either. The one who asked for her was Noah, eyes full of tears, voice breaking, "Please, come back." And Emily came back. Not for Nate, not for the paycheck, but for that boy who, without understanding, carried the weight of neglect on his fragile shoulders. In the big house, she spent her days with Noah in the garden, reading stories, inventing games, listening to childish confessions that said much, more than the words themselves. There was a strange peace in the boy's eyes when he was with her, a calm no toy ever seemed to offer. Nathaniel watched from afar, as if forcing himself not to feel. He saw the scene from the office window, arms always crossed, pretending it didn't affect him. But it did. On a muggy afternoon, Emily returned from the garden with Noah in her arms. He had fallen asleep during story time, and she was slowly climbing the stairs when she met Nate in the hallway. He saw her, and for a moment, he forgot to guard himself. He sleeps better with you than with any nanny I've ever hired." Emily looked at him, tired but not bitter. Maybe he doesn't need a nanny. Maybe he just needs someone to look him in the eyes and stay. Nate looked away, as if her words had hit him harder than he wanted. "You think I don't care. I think you don't know how to show it." The silence stretched between them, heavy, until she walked on with Noah. But that exchange lingered in the air, like an echo. The days repeated themselves, but the atmosphere was shifting. Their encounters became inevitable. In the kitchen, in the garden, in the long silent hallways of the mansion. And with each new encounter, there was an invisible duel between his pride and her sensitivity. One afternoon, on the veranda covered in blooming vines, Emily was cleaning paintbrushes after painting with Noah when Nate appeared. With 2 glasses of lemonade in hand, he sees you as family. She turned, surprised, took the glass without smiling. "Maybe because I treat him like a person." He nodded, staring at the horizon. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "You talk as if I don't love him. You do love him. But you're afraid to get close, as if loving were a risk." Nate turned to her slowly. They were closer than ever before. His gray-green eyes didn't shy away from hers. "And you? Aren't you afraid of getting hurt?" Emily hesitated, then answered in a low voice, "I've been hurt before. Surviving doesn't scare me. What scares me is going numb." He stayed silent, then took a step forward. They were just inches apart. Emily felt her heart race, her breathing shift. The world seemed to slow down. There was something in his eyes, not arrogance, but a silent plea. A restrained longing, an internal battle. Nate raised his hand as if to touch her face, but didn't have the chance. "Emily!" shouted Noah from upstairs, his voice high-pitched from a startled wake. The moment shattered like glass. Hitting the floor, Emily stepped back quickly, cheeks flushed. Nate closed his eyes for a brief second, like someone waking from a dream they shouldn't be dreaming. She rushed off to the boy, and he stood there, alone on the veranda. He knew he had crossed an invisible line, and that, for the first time in years, he wasn't in control of himself. Emily, walking into Noah's room, could still smell lemon on her palm, and without knowing why, held back tears burning in her eyes. The next morning dawned with low clouds over Charleston. The sky hinted not at a rainstorm, but a storm of judgment. Emily wore her simple cotton clothes, tied her hair into a rushed bun, and walked down the mansion stairs with light steps. Noah waited with colored pencils in hand and an unfinished drawing on the garden table. But something in his expression revealed that the outside world had already invaded theirs. She felt the stares before even understanding why. The cook avoided eye contact. One of the gardeners lowered his head the moment he saw her, and as she opened the veranda door, her apron pocket vibrated with a phone notification. When she checked it, her body froze. It was a celebrity gossip headline, and it was everywhere. The waitress who seduced the billionaire through his son. The photo showed her with Noah in her arms, laughing together in the garden. In the background, blurred, Nathaniel watching them from the veranda, an innocent snapshot. A tender moment, now twisted by malice, sensationalism, and cruelty. Emily felt the blood drain from her veins. She scrolled through the comments. There were attacks, insinuations, lies. Strangers claiming she had planned it all, that she had gotten close to Noah to secure a luxurious life, that no poor girl does anything for free. Her already fragile world collapsed silently. She ran inside, climbed to the small guest room she'd been staying in, and locked the door. Sat on the floor, back against the wall, and cried. A painful, muffled cry, from shame. From humiliation, Outside, the mansion went on moving. But inside, Emily, something broke. Hours later, composed on the outside but shattered inside, she came down with purpose. Found Nate in the study, standing before the unlit fireplace. He seemed to have read everything, but hadn't said a word. Emily spoke first. "You saw it?" He nodded, his gaze dark. "And you're not going to say anything?" "Not now. The media exposure is too high. My name, the company's. It's a sensitive time." She stood firm, even with her throat burning. "Delicate, that's what they called my life, always. Delicate when my father left us. Delicate when my brother got sick. Delicate when I knelt in that restaurant to feed your son. But this isn't delicate. It's cruel." He sighed, searching for words that wouldn't come. "Emily, it's not that simple. It is simple." She cut him off, eyes brimming with tears. "I'm the same woman you saw scrubbing the floor with tears in her eyes. The same one your son calls safety. The same one you—" Almost kissed. She took a deep breath, clenching her hands tightly. "But now I'm just the headline you chose to ignore." Nate didn't move, didn't argue. And that hurt. More than anything. Emily lowered her gaze, already decided. "I can endure poverty, Nathaniel. I always have. But not humiliation. Not anymore." She turned without waiting for a response. Walked to the room, packed the small bag with a few belongings she'd brought, and went down the stairs in silence. At the door, she heard the rush of small footsteps. "Emily." Noah appeared in pajamas with a drawing in his hand and desperation in his eyes. "Are you leaving?" She knelt in front of him, caressing his face tenderly. "I have to go, my love." "But why? Was I bad? Are you sad because of me?" "No, my angel." She smiled through tears. "You're the best part of all this, and you always will be." He tried to hug her, but she was already pulling away. With a heart in ruins, she crossed the door and didn't look back. From the top of the staircase, Nate watched everything. Silent, motionless, and once again, he lost what mattered most out of cowardice. A light rain fell over Charleston as Emily finished hanging clothes on the makeshift clothesline she had set up on the small back porch. The apartment was modest, with pale walls and old furniture inherited from her grandmother, but it was what she could afford. And in a way, that little place felt more honest than any mansion she'd ever stepped into. It had been 4 days since she left the Whitmore house. Since then, Noah hadn't called, and she understood. Someone had probably kept the phone from him, and Nate had vanished like a ghost. She felt at peace and shattered at the same time. The crying had stopped. What remained now was silence, the kind that comes with pain. Once you've accepted the loss. She was in the kitchen, washing a chipped mug, when there was a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her younger brother was in the room watching TV. She dried her hands on a dish towel and walked to the front. When she opened it, her heart stopped. Nathaniel was there. No suit, no bodyguards, no posture. He was soaked from the rain, his light brown hair falling over his forehead, his eyes hollow, as if he hadn't slept in days. She was speechless, so was he, but he was the first to speak. "I didn't know where else to go, so I came to you." She gripped the doorknob, her whole body tense. "You have mansions, Nate, yachts, offices in 3 states. You had other options," he looked down, "but only you know me." Emily took a deep breath. The tightness in her chest came back hard. She thought about closing the door, about protecting him from himself, but something in his expression was different. "You have 5 minutes." He stepped in slowly, as if entering sacred ground. And in a way, he was. She led him to the living room. He didn't sit, he stood, and began to speak like someone pouring out years of weight pride had kept locked away. "I failed my son's mother. not because I didn't love her, but because I didn't know how to love. I lived to impress my father. To keep the family name spotless, I hid that she had depression, that she was crying for help. I was absent, always traveling, pretending everything was fine while she was falling apart. His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. Emily watched him, eyes welling up but refusing to spill. When she died, I promised I'd protect Noah, but the truth is, I hid from him. I hid from everything. I thought that if I controlled the world around me, no one else would get hurt. He finally looked at her, his gray-green eyes wet and sincere, and then you showed up, with that apron, that tired smile. The courage of someone who's lost everything but still chooses to be kind. He took a step forward, breathing heavily. I'm afraid of loving you, Emily. She widened her eyes, frozen in place. Because I know that if I lose you, I won't come back. Silence fell between them, like the air before thunder. Then, without thinking, Emily stepped closer, touched his face with both hands, feeling the stubble beneath her fingers. He closed his eyes. Nate, love isn't control. It's surrender, he cried there, for the first time. Without restraint, without defenses. He cried like a man who at last understood the depth of his own loneliness. Emily hugged him, strong, long, and in that embrace she felt his pain and her own. But when he tried to kiss her, she stepped back. I still don't know if I can forgive you. He nodded without protest, eyes lowered. I'll wait. As long as it takes. She closed the door behind him, heart conflicted. She knew he loved her, but she still didn't know if it was enough. And outside, the rain continued to fall, as if washing away the weight of a past still waiting to be faced. The following weeks passed under the weight of unspoken words. Emily had returned to her simple routine, taking care of her brother, working longer shifts, and trying to push away the memory of Nate's eyes when he cried at her door. She hadn't spoken to him since, or to Noah, but the boy had sent a drawing by mail, her holding an umbrella over the two of them while he smiled. And in the corner of the page, in crooked letters, it read, "Are you still my home?" That morning, a formal envelope arrived at the building's reception. The Whitmore crest was embossed on the front, alongside a strong, elegant handwriting. Please attend the Whitmore residence at 4 p.m. today. Strictly confidential. Mrs. Margaret Whitmore. Requests your presence. Emily read and reread it. Margaret, Nathaniel's grandmother. The matriarch of the family. A woman feared by many, respected by all. Her heart tightened. There was something solemn about that invitation. At exactly 4 p.m., she walked through the mansion's halls again, but now with careful steps and a guarded expression. The butler led her in silence. The double doors of the ladies' room opened gently. Margaret Whitmore lay in a white canopy bed, wrapped in hand-embroidered sheets and soft light filtering through the curtains. Her skin was paler, her eyes deeper, but her posture, still that of someone who ruled empires with a gesture. She smiled when she saw Emily, a fragile smile, but full of purpose. Come in, my dear. Close the door. Emily obeyed silently, sat beside the bed, hands in her lap. Tense. I don't have much time, Margaret began, her voice low but clear, and I don't care about conventions right now. I want to speak as a woman, not as a Whitmore. Emily lowered her eyes, moved. I know my grandson. I know his limits. The pride, the armor he built to survive the name he carries. But I saw who he became since he met you. The lady reached toward the knit stand. A nurse handed her a sealed envelope. Margaret held it firmly before placing it in Emily's hands. This is the real will, the one no one else in the family knows about. Emily's eyes widened. Inside it, there's a clause I wrote myself. Nathaniel can only officially assume the presidency of the Whitmore Empire if he proves he's capable of loving. Not just leading, loving, and loving truthfully. Emily felt her hands tremble. The envelope felt heavier than anything she'd ever carried. Margaret gripped her hand with surprising strength. You are his chance to become a whole man, and maybe my last act of courage is to ask. You don't give up on him just yet. Emily blinked, trying to hold back tears. But I was hurt too, she whispered. I know, Margaret replied gently. But sometimes the most wounded hearts are the only ones that know how to heal. They sat in silence, hands intertwined. Time seemed to pause their dot when Emily left the room, the envelope still in hand. She felt the weight of something bigger than a decision. It was more than forgiveness. It was about transformation. And she knew that from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The grand hall of the Grand Whitmore Hotel shimmered with the pomp reserved for historic nights. Crystal chandeliers cast golden beams over a black-tie crowd of entrepreneurs, politicians and heirs chatting over champagne and veiled smiles. It was the Whitmore family's traditional charity gala, an event long featured in the most prestigious newspapers and magazines. Nathaniel stood beside the stage in a flawless tuxedo. But his eyes weren't on the speeches or the toasts. They were locked on the main entrance, and then she appeared. Emily walked in with calm steps, accompanying Mrs. Dalton, a widowed lady from high society who had invited her as her personal guest. The matriarch, knowing what was to come, had insisted on bringing her. Emily wore a simple navy blue dress, lightweight and modest, yet it highlighted her natural beauty with an elegance no designer could replicate. Her hair was down in soft waves, and her eyes scanned the room for refuge, trying to escape the inevitable. Attention. Whispers started, stares, quiet judgments. The waitress? How did she dare show up here? Did he invite her? Emily felt the flush rise in her face, but kept her composure. She wasn't there to hide. She was there because something between them wasn't finished, and because, deep down, her heart hadn't let go. Nate saw her and froze. For a moment, he forgot the stage awaited him, that the crowd expected a speech. The woman he loved was there. And in that second, he knew he could no longer live torn between who he was and who he was expected to be. The MC announced his name. The audience applauded. He stepped onto the stage with steady steps, face solemn. He took the microphone, but didn't open the prepared speech. Took a deep breath. His eyes swept the room until they found her. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice echoing between marble columns. Tonight was supposed to be another celebration of our legacy, of our empire, of what we've built through effort and strategy. He paused. No one moved. But a few months ago, a woman came into my life, not out of interest, not for ambition. She came out of compassion. The murmurs ceased entirely. Emily held her breath. She fed my son when no one else noticed, touched my heart when I didn't even know it still beat, and showed me that you can't lead an empire if you can't first lead yourself. Some faces showed confusion, others admiration. You called her a waitress, an opportunist. But she is the woman who taught me more about being a father and a man than all the business advice I've ever received. Emily's eyes stung. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just an apology. It was a public surrender, a break from everything that had kept him silent. Emily Dawson, he said, looking straight at her from the stage, if you can still look at me and see more than my mistakes, come up here, and let me start over with you. The hall fell into complete silence. Every eye turned to her. Emily hesitated. Inside, fear screamed. But love was there too. The love that had survived pain. The love that had outlasted shame. She took the first step, then the second. And before she knew it, she was crossing the hall as if walking across a chasm, guided only by faith in what she felt. She climbed the stage steps, stood before him, eyes teary, heart racing. "I'm still afraid," she whispered. "So am I," Nate replied, voice hoarse. She smiled through her tears. "But if I have to fall, let it be with you." He pulled her gently, reverently, as if she were made of glass. And then, in front of the entire elite that once looked down on her, he kissed her. A long kiss, intense, full of everything left unspoken. And this time, there were no judgments, only applause. And sighs. Life didn't go back to being the same after the gala. Not because they became public figures, or because the stares around them changed, but because, for the first time, Emily and Nathaniel stopped running from themselves. And that, in itself, was a new way of living. The former waitress now arrived. Each day at a bright room filled with large windows and colorful posters on the walls. The space belonged to the Noah Foundation, a newly established NGO offering tutoring, psychological support, and meals to children in vulnerable situations. Emily was the director of the project, but didn't use titles. Everyone called her Miss Emily. With respect and affection, Noah ran through the foundation's halls like someone who had finally learned what childhood meant. And every afternoon he waited for his mother, or rather, for her to go home together. A modest townhouse with a porch, surrounded by small trees and a messy garden shaped by small hands. Emily, her younger brother, and Noah shared the space with laughter, asterisk. Pillows on the floor, and the smell of fresh bread in the oven. Nate came by every evening after work. He arrived tie-less, sleeves rolled up, with books in hand. He read to his son, helped with homework, set the table, learned in silence to love without grand speeches. That night, sitting in the backyard under strings of lights between the trees, Noah lay with his head in Emily's lap. Nate sat beside them, quietly watching. "Emily," the boy whispered, eyes nearly closed, "can I call you Mom even if it's not for real?" She paused. Her eyes welled up. "You can call me whatever you want, Noah, but just know, in my heart, you've been my son for a long time." Nate looked at her, moved, and in that moment there was no doubt. They weren't perfect, but they were real. The next morning, as she prepared breakfast and Nate read the news with Noah in his lap, the phone rang. It was Nate's press officer calling with another magazine cover request, exclusive interview, photo shoot. He ended the call with a short phrase. "Tell them no. The story that matters is already being lived." Emily turned, laughing. "Another offer to show your human side to the media?" Nate shrugged, pretending not to care. "I've already got you. The rest is just noise." She stepped closer, holding out a cup, and said softly, "You're learning." He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I'm just trying to be worthy of the woman who taught me what love with dignity looks like." In that backyard, among children's voices and bare feet, Emily felt what she had never felt in her entire life, belonging. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the name. It was his gaze. Noah's hand holding hers. The peace of being in a place where she no longer needed to explain herself. It was a warm autumn afternoon. One of those when the wind carries more than dry leaves, it carries memories. In the backyard, between the rope swing and children's laughter echoing through the neighborhood, Emily sat in an old wooden chair watching Noah play with Max. Her younger brother, Nathaniel, returned from the market with grocery bags, wearing a simple shirt and hair tousled by the wind. Nothing about him resembled the untouchable executive who once avoided affection like fire. He was just a man whole, trying to be better. Every day Emily welcomed him with a small smile, full of peace. the kind that comes from within. He walked over and, without saying a word, placed a light kiss on the top of her head. They no longer needed grand gestures. Love now lived in the details. In the distance, Noah shouted, "Dad, look what I made." Nate dropped the bags and ran to his son. Emily stayed there, watching the scene, eyes wet. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. That night, as the wind softly tapped the windows and the world outside seemed to turn at a different pace, Emily wrote in her journal, an old habit she'd never abandoned. The words flowed gently, as if each line were a farewell to the pain she once carried. "I didn't want to be saved," she wrote, "just seen, heard, respected." She closed the notebook slowly, leaned back on the couch, and looked at Nate, asleep, with Noah resting on his chest, both breathing in sync. On the television, a report featured new models of social management in major companies. Among the highlights, the Noah Foundation Project, a new way to transform wealth into impact, to give back, to honor. Emily didn't want fame, never did, but seeing the world become a little fairer, even through small acts, made everything worth it. She knew there would still be challenges. Life wouldn't stop testing them. But there, between two very different lives that found each other, by chance or fate, she learned the greatest lesson of all. And then, the narrator's voice emerged like a whisper from the heart of the story. Emily wasn't looking for riches. She was looking for respect. And it was precisely by expecting nothing that she received everything. Love sometimes begins with a shared meal and ends with two souls made whole. On life's screen, there were no fireworks. There was a look, a touch, a child sleeping peacefully between two worlds that had learned to coexist. And in that imperfect home, built on new beginnings, a new definition of happiness was born. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? From 0 to 10, how would you rate it in your opinion? I'd really love to know how this story touched your heart. Leave your comment below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. And before you go, I've saved another story, even more intense and moving, that will touch you in a special way. You won't want to miss it.